What went into conference was weaker than current law. It would provide for the cleanup of 4 of the 14 sites with coal ash ponds on them, but would throw the other 10 into a process that could easily result in their being left in place. All of these sites are leaking heavy metal contamination into groundwater. Some of them are leaking into rivers and drinking water supplies as well. Our position has been that they all need to be cleaned up, and that the cleanup needs to be paid for by Duke, which is a very wealthy, Duke Energy is a very wealthy corporation. And it's really the shareholders' responsibility to oversee the management of the corporation, and that failed in this case. Unfortunately, the bill that went into conference not only would potentially allow those 10 sites to stay without being cleaned up, but it would also not make it clear that Duke Energy needs to pay for that. So that ends up really protecting, that's a call, but that ends up really protecting shareholders at the expense of communities and the public resource.
I think it's important for people to make sure they heard what you said at the beginning of that answer, which is that for the most part, what is going to pass the General Assembly is weaker than current law.
You know, this has been a very disappointing session across the board on environmental issues. I had real difficulty thinking of any. I think there's a minor bill that helps local governments, frees local governments to do some regulation in floodplains, which is a good idea. But it's really hard to point to legislation in this session that actually takes a step forward on anything in the environment. The House has been helpful at batting away some particularly bad steps backwards that have been suggested by the Senate. But we were hopeful that the coal ash bill at least would take some major steps forward, and at least what went into conference has not.